Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we're going to be talking about literal, which is a class in the typing module. I believe it's new in 3.7 or 3.8. I don't know. It's somewhat recent. So I figured I'd talk about it and show you a use case where I might use literal to make my code a little bit better. So let's jump into it. And this is going to tie really closely into overloads. So if you missed the overload video, I will link that down in the description as well. At least I find that it's most useful with literal. Now, when we're talking about literals in Python, it's actually really hard to explain, I think. But let me show you some examples. So if you were to call, oops, this is from the last video, not bad. If you were to call f with some string literal, this is what's referred to as a literal. It's, you know, a series of characters that represent a value. This would, you know, the type of this argument could be literal foo, like so. But if you call this, you know, x equals foo and then f of x, unless you've type annotated this as literal foo, the type checker is not going to know that this string has the value foo. That's kind of the difference there. Like, you can either pass variables or literals, and literals have special syntactical meaning. And the type checker can actually take advantage of that. So let me give you a quick example. Do we want to do the subprocess example? Sure, we'll do the subprocess example. So let's say that we're calling a process, and if we go to Python, if we do import subprocess, if we do subprocess.check output echo hi, by default this is going to return a byte string, a binary string. However, if we pass the text argument, text equals true, you'll see that we get a string back. So I might write a small wrapper around subprocess, which does something like this. Def output star command as a stir, so it takes positional string arguments. And we might have this text, which is a boolean and defaults to false. And if I didn't have overloads, didn't have literal, any of that stuff like that, I would say that this returns a union of bytes and stir, because it could return two different values. I'm typing import union, and in our case, let's just do return subprocess.check output command text equals text. And if we do reveal type on output of echo hi, and we do also text equals true. Now, if we were to run this through MyPy right now, and actually we could run these two. Print output echo hi, and we'll do the same thing with text equals true. So if we run this, we'll get an error that, oops, I forgot to import subprocess, of course. Import subprocess. So let's get rid of some of these extra line breaks. Oops, Python 3t.py. It's going to error on reveal type because this is a MyPy specific thing. But you'll see that this one prints, you know, our byte string, and this one prints our, you know, text string here. And reveal type is not defined. That's fine. If installed MyPy, and if we run MyPy on this, MyPy t.py, you'll see that it tells us the revealed type is a union of these two types. So MyPy doesn't, you know, it isn't smart. Well, it isn't as smart as it could be because we just told it, you know, this can return two different types. Now we can actually do better than this here, and we're going to use an overload and literal here from typing import overload. We're going to define two overloads of this function. Overload def output star command stir, and we're going to say text is a boolean, but we're going to say that it is a literal of true. And that way, if we ever call this function and literally pass true in here, then we know that text will be true, and so this will always return stir. We'll make another overload, def output star command stir text literal false equals false. I think this will work. We'll default to bytes, and then we have our actual implementation below it. So I think now MyPy should be able to tell, let's see, overloaded signature 2 will never be matched. Signature 1's parameter types are the same or broader. Oh, I forgot to import literal. That's a weird error. But I saw the name literal is not defined. MyPy gets confused if you don't... What's going on here? You don't do all the things that it needs to do. We still have an error here. Overload function signatures 1 and 2 overlap with incompatible return types. Interesting. I think we have to do this, maybe? Let's try that. Still overlaps. Let's do literal false. There we go. That's the correct way to do this. Does this change it? Okay. Alright, so what this is saying is when you pass text as the literal true, which is what we have for this here, then we will get stir as the output, and you can see that we actually, when we reveal type here, you'll see that on line 19, which is this one here, we get bytes, and on this line we get stir, and this is slightly more complicated than I thought it would have to be. Oops, I wonder... Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is correct. Okay, so this is the two different signatures here. But basically, you can use literal to tell MyPy, you know, if you get a specific string here, or sorry, a specific boolean here, that will get string, otherwise we'll get bytes. Another case that I've seen literal used in a kind of interesting fashion is a way to narrow down constants. So I had a particular function in my CI system, which was, I don't know, something like report status, and it had, I don't know, some arguments, but one of the arguments was the status type. And in my database, it was always a string, and so it could have a number of values, but I wanted it to have very specific values. Like it could either be passed, failed, or errored. And the way that I did that is with a union of literals, and I'll actually show you a better way to do this in a second. Passed, literal failed, and literal errored. Now, of course, this is super verbose and kind of annoying to write, so there's actually a shortcut for literal. So let me just put this up here so you can see that. And the shortcut for this is literal takes positional arguments, so you can just use passed, failed, errored, and that's kind of a shortcut for this up here. And so then you could say status could be a literal of passed, failed, errored. Now, of course, this is a little bit clunky because it means every time you call this function, you have to literally write the string out that's one of these values, and you might do better by having some constants. And fortunately, you can do constants with this as well. So you could say passed equals, you know, passed, literal passed equals passed. Now, of course, this looks a little bit funny. And you could do that for the other ones. There's actually a shortcut here, which somebody showed me, and it's not in the documentation, so I don't know if this is actually supposed to work this way. It is spec'd this way, so the PEP talks about this, but the typing documentation does not. You can mark this as final as well. I did a video on final, so I'll link that in the description. I actually forgot to talk about this because I didn't even know it was a behavior. But final also implicitly applies literal, so that way you could apply constants and pass them into functions here. But anyway, that's literal. That's the two main use cases that I've used it for. There may be others, but hopefully this is helpful. If you have additional things you want me to explain, leave a comment below or reach out to me on the various platforms. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.